It began on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in November 2019, when Clara Moreau was helping a customer who wanted to return a defective smartphone. She had been working for 2 years at Electronics Plus on Lincoln Road in Miami Beach, a mid-sized store nestled between tourist souvenir shops and expensive cafes. At 28, she had long since grown used to the routine. Friendly smiles, solving technical problems, meeting sales targets, and sending 80% of her salary home to the Philippines every month. Clara was the eldest of 4 siblings. Her father, Ricardo, had lost his job at a textile factory in Quezon City 3 years prior. Her mother, Grace, sold homemade calamay at the local market, but the income barely covered rice and basic necessities. Clara's younger siblings, Divine, 16, Precious, 14, and little Marco, 11, needed school fees, books, and uniforms. The family lived in a concrete house with a corrugated iron roof in a neighborhood where the streets turned into rivers during the rainy season. Clara had studied accountancy at the University of Santo Tomas, graduating with honors despite the night shifts she worked concurrently at a call center. But even with a university degree, the salary in Manila was the equivalent of $400 per month, not enough to support a family. The USA offered 10 times that. So she had applied to dozens of overseas employment agencies, survived interviews over shaky video calls, and in September 2017, she had landed in Miami with an H-1B visa and a suitcase full of hope. She shared a 1-bedroom apartment in Hialeah with 2 other Filipinas, Jenny, who worked in a nursing home in Coral Gables, and Rose, a waitress at a Cuban restaurant. The apartment was clean but sparsely furnished. They slept on mattresses on the floor, cooked rice on a single hot plate, and video called their families together on Sundays, sharing the strongest Wi-Fi signal. The customer that Tuesday was different from the usual tourists or stressed businessmen. Lucas Fontaine was 45, spoke with a calm, friendly voice, and seemed to genuinely listen when Clara explained the technical details. He worked as a senior maintenance manager at a luxury apartment complex in Brickell, he told her. Not a glamorous job, but stable, with health insurance and a regular income. "You really know your stuff," Lucas said appreciatively, while Clara diagnosed his smartphone. "Most salespeople here just read from a script." "I studied IT in the Philippines," Clara explained. "Accountancy was my major, but technology always interested me." "Philippines?" Lucas's eyes lit up. "My first serious girlfriend was Filipina. Jenny from Davao, that was, 20 years ago. She was a nurse at Jackson Memorial." The mention felt familiar and safe. Clara relaxed a little. Customers who shared personal stories were usually the most pleasant. They saw her as a person, not a service provider. Lucas returned regularly over the following weeks. First for a laptop battery, then for a charging cable, later for an external hard drive. The purchases were small, but the conversations grew longer. He asked questions about Clara's family, her dreams, and her experiences as a migrant in the US. He spoke about his job, the difficult tenants he managed, and his divorce 5 years prior. "Divorced?" Clara had asked carefully during their 4th conversation. "Since 2014, Lucas confirmed with a tired smile. "My ex-wife and I were just too young when we got married. We parted as friends. No kids, thankfully. That would have made everything more complicated." The information was reassuring. Clara had clear boundaries regarding married men. Too many Filipinas in Miami had horror stories about affairs with married Americans who used their visa situations against them. But Lucas was single, friendly, and apparently genuinely interested in her as a person. In January 2020, he invited her for coffee. "Just coffee," he emphasized. "I know you have to be careful. I respect that." They met at a Starbucks near the store, neutral and public. They spoke for 2 hours about everything, from Clara's university days to Lucas's plans to eventually start a small maintenance business. What Clara didn't know, Lucas Fontaine was not divorced. He was very much married to Leah Fontaine, a French-Canadian elementary school teacher he had met in Quebec 12 years ago. They lived together in a modest house in Kendall, a 20-minute drive from his workplace. Leah taught third grade at the Miami Bilingual Academy and believed her husband was working overtime when he claimed to be fixing late-night emergencies at the apartment complex. And Clara was not the first. 3 years earlier, there had been Maria, a 23-year-old Venezuelan who worked at the lobby cafeteria of his apartment complex. Lucas had helped her pay her rent when her visa expired. The affair lasted 9 months until Maria had to return to Caracas, and Lucas gently broke off contact. Before that, there had been Aisha, a Somali cleaning woman whom he tutored in English and with whom he had a 6-month relationship that ended when she asked if he would introduce her to his family. Lucas had a pattern. He chose women who were financially vulnerable, culturally isolated, and grateful for attention from someone who could solve their problems with a signed check. He invested just enough emotionally to build trust, then retreated when real commitment threatened. He told himself the relationships were mutually beneficial. He offered support and companionship. They offered affection and a distraction from a marriage that had become routine. In February, the Thursday evening calls began. Lucas called Clara every week at 8:30 p.m., right after her shift ended and before her roommates came home. The calls lasted an hour, sometimes longer. They didn't talk about money or superficialities, but about deeper topics: responsibility toward family, dreams of financial stability, the loneliness of life in a foreign country. "You're not like the other people here," Lucas said during their 5th call. "You understand what it means to work for something bigger than yourself." Clara felt seen. In Miami, she was usually invisible, the saleswoman behind the counter, the migrant, the money sender. But Lucas treated her like someone whose opinion mattered, whose stories were important. What she didn't hear was the carefully constructed performance of a man who had already practiced these lines, with Maria, with Aisha, with others before them. Every woman had felt special. Every one had believed she was different from the previous ones. None had realized they were all following the same script, line for line. Lucas Fontaine was a master of logistics. Maintaining an affair while married required precision, planning, and the ability to manage multiple identities simultaneously. After 12 years of marriage to Leah, he had perfected the system. His apartment complex in Brickell offered the perfect cover. As the senior maintenance manager, he could credibly claim that emergencies would call him out at any time of day or night. A clogged pipe at 10 p.m.? Plausible. A heating failure on a Saturday morning? Understandable. Leah had stopped asking questions about his irregular working hours years ago. The second phone was simple. A prepaid smartphone bought with cash at a Walmart in Homestead, registered under a fake name. He charged it at night in his basement workshop, where Leah never went. The device existed solely for communication with Clara, a digital boundary between his family life and his affair. The meetings took place in motels in Hialeah and North Miami Beach, mid-range places where cash was accepted and no one asked questions. Lucas avoided credit cards for these bookings, always paid in cash, and varied the locations to avoid patterns. When he drove his car, he parked 2 blocks away. Most often he used Uber, paid for via a separate account linked to his work email. To Clara, this caution felt like consideration. She interpreted his secrecy as protection of her reputation. A Filipina seen with an American man risked gossip in her tightly knit community. She didn't understand that the logistics were protecting him, not her. But Lucas's system had a weakness. Leah Fontaine was not stupid. She had never directly confronted the affair with Maria. But the credit card statements had given it away. Dinners at restaurants they had never visited together, gas stations in neighborhoods Lucas had no reason to be in. When she confronted him, Lucas had used his standard excuse. A mistake, a one-time thing. It's over. Leah had decided to stay. She had no family in the US, her visa depended on Lucas's sponsorship, and a divorce would mean potentially returning to Quebec, where she no longer had a job. Better to maintain the facade of a functioning marriage than to lose everything. But in February 2020, when Leah became pregnant for the first time in 11 years of marriage, her tolerance changed. The baby was unplanned. She had believed infertility was her fate after years of trying unsuccessfully. The pregnancy felt like a miracle or a complication, depending on the perspective. At 39, carrying her first child, Leah had no more patience for Lucas's pattern. When she noticed him showing the familiar signs again, too much attention to his appearance, unexplained absences, the second phone she thought she'd forgotten about, she knew he had started again. She found the confirmation in his truck. Lucas had forgotten to remove a motel receipt, the Dolphin Inn in Hialeah, booked for a Thursday evening, exactly when he claimed to be fixing a burst water pipe. The receipt was in his name, cash payment, room 28. Leah researched methodically. She installed a tracking app on Lucas's iPad, which ran on the same Apple ID as his main phone. The app showed his movements. Regular visits to Lincoln Road every Thursday afternoon, stops at motels in North Miami, time slots that didn't align with his claimed work emergencies. Then she found the videos. Lucas had made a fatal oversight. He had allowed Clara to film moments from their meetings on her phone, harmless clips, he thought, of them laughing, eating, talking. What he didn't know, Clara had saved these videos to her iCloud. And Lucas, who occasionally helped Clara configure her Apple devices, had once used his own iPad to briefly log into her iCloud to perform an update. He hadn't completely logged out afterward. The connection remained active in the background, invisible to both of them. When Clara uploaded new videos, clips from a motel in Aventura, filmed at the end of March, iCloud automatically synced them with all connected devices, including Lucas's iPad, which lay on the coffee table in his living room, where Leah frequently used it to prepare teaching materials for her students. The notification arrived one Saturday morning. New photos in iCloud. Leah clicked, unsuspecting, expecting Lucas's usual work photos of repaired pipes or maintenance reports. Instead, she saw a thumbnail. Her husband, laughing in a hotel bed, next to a young Asian woman who was smiling at the camera. She clicked further. There were dozens. Videos of intimate moments, screenshots of text messages where Lucas made promises, "When my financial situation is more stable, we can be together." Photos of gifts he had bought Clara, a new iPhone, a gold bracelet, cash in envelopes. Leah's first emotion was not anger, but cold clarity. Her husband was cheating on her again while she was carrying his child. The woman was young enough to be her student, and this time Lucas had acted foolishly enough to leave behind evidence she could control. She took screenshots of everything, saved the videos to a separate USB stick, documented dates, times, and locations. Then she began to plan. Divorce was an option, but public scandal would jeopardize her visa and put her pregnancy in a precarious situation. A private solution was better, one that eliminated the problem without destabilizing her own life. The solution was Clara Moreau. If the young Filipina understood that Lucas was married, lying, and soon to be a father, she might disappear voluntarily. And if she didn't leave voluntarily, Leah had enough evidence to make her life in Miami very unpleasant. On Monday evening, while Lucas claimed to be repairing a broken air conditioner, Leah researched Clara. Social media was sparse, a Facebook profile with strict privacy settings, an Instagram with photos of Filipino food and family pictures. But Lucas's text messages contained enough details. Clara worked at Electronics Plus, Lincoln Road. She lived in Hialeah. She sent money home to her family. Leah found Clara's phone number in one of the synchronized screenshots. On Tuesday evening, while Lucas was in the shower, she called. The phone rang at 7:47 p.m., while Clara was folding laundry in the tiny kitchen of her apartment. The number was unknown, but a Miami area code. She answered, expecting perhaps a customer from the store or a wrong number. "Hello, is this Clara Moreau?" The voice was female, educated, with a slight French accent. "Yes, this is Clara. How can I help you?" "My name is Leah Fontaine. I believe you know my husband, Lucas." The words hit Clara like ice water. Husband. Lucas had said he was divorced. He had talked about his ex-wife as if she were the past, a closed chapter. But the woman on the phone spoke in the present tense. "My husband." I'm not sure what you mean," Clara stammered, the automatic defense of a person caught in circumstances they cannot immediately escape. "I think you do," Leah replied calmly. "I've seen the videos, the text messages, the hotel receipts. I'm not calling to scream or threaten. I'm calling because we need to have a conversation, woman to woman." Clara slowly sat down on her bed, her heart pounding. Videos. Leah had seen the videos Clara had recorded, private moments that were never meant for other eyes. The technology she had used to preserve her memories had now betrayed her. "He told me he was divorced," Clara said softly, the truth, but it sounded weak even to her own ears. "Of course he did," Leah said without bitterness, only tired resignation. "He told Maria that too, and Aisha before that. Lucas tells many women many things." Maria. Aisha. The names fell like stones. Clara hadn't been unique. She hadn't been special. She was the latest iteration of a pattern, chosen for her vulnerability and discarded when circumstances changed. "I don't want drama," Leah continued. "I want a solution. I'm pregnant, Clara. 3 months. My baby deserves a stable father, not more chaos. That's why I suggest we meet and discuss how we can end this cleanly." "End this cleanly?" Clara felt nausea rising. "I'm offering you financial compensation, not hush money. I'm not asking you to hide something that has already happened, but I'm asking for your cooperation to end this situation. No more contact with Lucas, no social media posts, no attempts at revenge. Just a clean break that allows everyone to move on." The offer was so direct that Clara was briefly speechless. Leah was negotiating as if this were a business transaction. But then it became clear. To Leah, it was a problem that could be solved with the right payment. How much? Clara hated herself for the question, but she needed to understand the scope of what was being offered. "Enough to make a real difference in your life, but we should discuss the details in person. How about tomorrow evening, 6 p.m., Café Versailles in Little Havana, public, neutral?" "I need to think about it," Clara said. "Of course, but understand this, my patience has limits. If you want to handle this through lawyers or the police, that's your choice. But I'm offering you the chance to resolve this discreetly and walk away with money. Most women in your situation don't get this opportunity." After the call, Clara sat still for 30 minutes. Her roommates weren't home yet. The apartment was silent, only the hum of the refrigerator and distant traffic. She felt foolish, used, worthless. Lucas's Thursday evening calls, his promises of a future together, the way he had made her feel important. It had all been a script, a performance perfected through repetition. She texted her best friend Jennifer in Orlando. "Lucas is married, his wife is pregnant, she wants to meet tomorrow." Jennifer's reply came instantly. "Do not go alone. Meet in a public place. Tell me where and when." Clara replied, "Café Versailles, Little Havana, 6 p.m. tomorrow. If something happens, you know." The next evening, Clara put on her most conservative outfit, a navy dress with sleeves, flat shoes, minimal jewelry. She wanted to look respectable, serious, someone who deserved negotiation, not contempt. Café Versailles was an institution in Little Havana, always packed with Cuban families, tourists and business people. The smell of café con leche and tostadas filled the air. Leia was already seated at a corner table, partially shielded from the main crowd. She was smaller than Clara expected, elegant in the way that education and money provide, a cream-colored blazer over a simple black dress. Her baby bump didn't show yet. "Thank you for coming," Leia said as Clara sat down. Her voice carried the same controlled politeness as on the phone. "I still don't understand what you want," Clara said directly. "I want my marriage to survive. I want my child to grow up in a stable home. And I want this situation resolved before it becomes public and damages us all." Leia slid a brown envelope across the table. $15,000, cash. That covers everything. Your time with my husband, your silence about what happened, your cooperation in ensuring this ends cleanly. Clara opened the envelope. The dollar bills were real, neatly stacked. $15,000 was almost 8 months of her salary. Enough to significantly support her family back home, build an emergency fund, maybe even find a better apartment. "That covers your feelings," Clara said softly. "Mine aren't covered." Leia blinked in surprise. She had expected gratitude, or at least pragmatic acceptance. "I'm not sure I understand," Leia said. "I was lied to for 6 months by your husband. I was promised a future he never intended to give. I was treated like a problem that can be managed with money, instead of a person with feelings." Leia's patience flickered. Pregnancy hormones made every emotion more intense. "You knew he was older. You knew the situation might be complicated. You chose to get involved. He told me he was divorced." Clara's voice grew sharper. "He told me you had gone your separate ways. He made it sound like I wasn't destroying anything." "He told you what you wanted to hear," Leia said coldly, "just like he told me what I wanted to hear when we got married. Just like he told the Venezuelan girl before you what she wanted to hear." The mention of Maria hit Clara with realization and humiliation. She hadn't been special, not chosen for her unique qualities. She was the latest iteration, chosen for her vulnerability. "Sign the agreement," Leia continued, pushing another document forward. "Take the money. Find someone who isn't already building a family with someone else." Clara quickly read the agreement. Standard non-disclosure language. No contact with Lucas. No public discussion of the relationship. No claims over promises he made. "I don't want your marriage," Clara said. "I don't want to ruin your family. I want to stop being treated like a transaction that can be cancelled with the right payment." "What do you want then?" Leia's question sounded genuinely confused. "I want him to tell me the truth. I want to hear from him that everything he promised was a lie. I want to stop wondering if there was something real that I'm giving up for money." "You're not giving up anything real," Leia retorted sharply. "You're giving up an affair with a married man whose wife is pregnant. You're giving up promises that were never meant to be kept." The words landed with brutal clarity. Clara wasn't giving up love. She was giving up the illusion of love, the fantasy that someone like Lucas would actually leave his established life for someone like her. "Keep your money," Clara said, suddenly standing up. "Keep your husband, raise your baby. I'll find my own way out of this mess." She walked toward the door, but Leia's voice stopped her. "If you leave without signing, I'll make sure everyone knows what you did. Your employer, your roommates, the Filipino community in Miami, everyone will know that you're the kind of woman who goes after married men." The threat was spoken calmly, but it carried the weight of social destruction. Miami's Filipino community was tightly knit. Reputation affected job opportunities, living arrangements, social standing. Being labeled as someone who targets married men would follow Clara indefinitely. "Do what you want," Clara replied, reaching the door handle. "I'm done being used by people and then blamed for being used." She left the cafe at 6:43 p.m., moving quickly toward the bustling Calle Ocho. The sun was just setting, golden light bathing the street in orange and pink. But Clara didn't notice the beauty. She felt smaller with every passing minute. Leah followed her. The pregnancy slowed her movements, but grim determination drove her forward. She couldn't let Clara leave without some form of resolution. The affair couldn't end with loose ends that could unravel into public scandal. By 6:51 p.m., both women had reached a parking lot behind a Cuban supermarket, a poorly lit space with blind spots created by support pillars and parked trucks. It was the kind of space where confrontations could occur without immediate witnesses. "Clara, wait!" Leah's voice carried the desperation she had controlled during their cafe meeting. "We need to finish this conversation." But Clara didn't stop. She had heard enough, absorbed enough humiliation, accepted enough blame for a situation that had been constructed by someone else's lies. What happened in the next few minutes would be reconstructed from physical evidence, witness testimonies, and the audio recording that continued to run in Clara's purse, recorded on the iPhone Lucas had given her, unaware that it would document his own crime. The parking lot behind the Sedano supermarket was a patchwork of cracked asphalt and faded parking lines. Sodium vapor lamps cast orange light that created deep shadows between parked vehicles. At 6:54 p.m., only 3 cars remained: a white Honda Civic, a blue Ford pickup, and Leah's silver Toyota Camry parked near the back exit. Clara moved quickly toward the street, her purse pressed tightly against her side. Her phone was still in recording mode, the app running silently in the background, capturing every sound. Her accelerated steps, the distant hum of traffic on Calle Ocho, Leah's voice behind her. "You're going to destroy my family!" Leah cried out, her voice breaking with emotion. She was moving faster now, despite her pregnancy, driven by a desperation that overcame caution. "My baby deserves better than to have a father who leaves his family for someone he barely knows." Clara turned around, her own anger finally rising to the surface. "Your baby deserves better than to have a father who lies to everyone, including you." The words hung in the humid evening air. For a moment, both women stood in the shadows, breathing heavily, each burdened by the weight of what Lucas's lies had done to their lives. The parking lot had a low concrete wall along its rear boundary, a divider between the supermarket property and an empty lot behind it. The wall was about 1 meter high, designed to mark cars, not to protect. On the other side was a 2-meter drop to uneven ground, overgrown with weeds and scattered with trash that people had thrown over the wall. Clara had backed up toward this wall without realizing its proximity. In the poor lighting, the drop behind it was not obvious. She was focused on Leah, on the confrontation, on the need to escape a situation that was emotionally crushing her. Leah moved closer, her hand outstretched, as if touch could somehow persuade Clara to stay, to sign, to disappear. "Please," Leah said, her voice softer now, almost pleading. "Take the money, get out of our lives. Let me try to save my marriage before my baby is born." "Your marriage is not my responsibility," Clara retorted, her voice firm, despite the tears she felt coming. "I'm not the person who broke vows. I'm the person who was lied to." Leah reached for Clara's arm, grabbing not aggressively but firmly, the desperate attempt of a person to physically stop someone from leaving before a resolution was reached. "You don't understand." But Clara sharply pulled her arm back, instinctively. The movement was abrupt, unbalanced. Her foot slipped on the oily asphalt. She stumbled backward, her hands grabbing for support. The low concrete wall caught her lower legs at knee height. Her upper body tipped further backward, momentum carrying her over the edge. For a second, she seemed to hang in the air, arms flailing wildly. Then she fell. The impact was immediate and devastating. Clara's head hit a sharp rock first, hidden among the weeds, the kind of concealed danger that makes empty lots deadly. Her body followed, twisted at an angle that offered no chance of survival. Leah stood at the wall, staring down in the poor light. She could see Clara's outline, motionless among the weeds, could hear the unnatural silence, the total absence of movement or screaming. For exactly 8 seconds, Leah stood paralyzed, her pregnant hand on her stomach, her mind reeling with what had just happened. Then muscle memory took over. She pulled out her phone, fingers trembling as she dialed 911. "There's been an accident," she said when the dispatcher answered, her voice mechanical with shock. "A woman fell behind the Sedano supermarket on Calle Ocho. She's not moving." The call was recorded at 6:58 p.m., 4 minutes after Clara had reached the parking lot. Emergency services were dispatched immediately. Down in the weeds, Clara's phone had survived the fall, though the screen was cracked. The recording app continued to run, capturing the silence after the impact, Leah's distant call to 911, the approaching sound of sirens. At 7:03 p.m., paramedics reached the scene. They climbed over the concrete wall and found Clara's body in the weeds, face down, her broken phone next to her right hand. The first paramedic to arrive, Alex Rodriguez, immediately checked her pulse. Nothing. Her head had visible trauma, blood soaking the earth around the rock that had fractured her skull. "Female, late 20s, no pulse, severe head trauma," Rodriguez radioed to the hospital. Time of death estimated at 6:57 p.m. Up in the parking lot, Leah gave her first statement to Miami Police Sergeant Maria Santos, who had arrived 4 minutes after the paramedics. "We had a meeting," Leah explained, her voice trembling, "at Café Versailles. I had found out she was having an affair with my husband. I wanted to resolve it privately for my family. When she refused to cooperate and got angry, she left the café. I followed her, trying to finish our discussion. We argued here. She backed away. I tried to stop her from leaving before we reached any resolution. She pulled away from me, lost her balance, fell over the wall. The account was plausible but incomplete. Sergeant Santos noted the pregnancy, the obvious emotional distress, the context of the affair, all elements that complicated the scene. "Did you touch her?" Santos asked. "I reached for her arm," Leah admitted, trying to stop her from leaving, "but I didn't push her. I didn't want her to fall. I just wanted her to listen to me." Digital forensics would provide a more complex picture. Clara's phone contained the audio recording that had run continuously from the cafe meeting through the parking lot confrontation. The sound quality was poor due to the phone's position in her purse, but enhanced analysis would reveal crucial details about the final minutes. The recording showed Leah pursuing Clara, despite claims that she was only following to discuss. It captured Leah's desperate plea, "You're going to destroy my family." And Clara's retort, "Your baby deserves better than a father who lies to everyone." More importantly, it captured the moment of physical contact, the sound of Leah's voice saying, "Please," the rustling of movement, Clara's sharp intake of breath as she pulled back, then the terrible thud of the fall, followed by silence. The entire event, from Leah's desperate call to Clara's retraction and the fall, lasted less than 15 seconds. The investigation would classify the death as accidental fall during a confrontation. The medical examiner would confirm the cause of death as blunt force trauma to the head. The police would rule out deliberate homicide, but they would note that Leah's actions, following a woman who refused to talk and making physical contact, were the proximate cause of the fall. The case would remain closed without charges, ruled as a tragic outcome of a confrontation driven by a man's lies. Leah would be shattered. She would carry the guilt of that evening, the silent knowledge of her pursuing and grabbing for the rest of her life. She would give birth to a healthy baby girl in August, a child who would never know the full price of her father's lies. Lucas would never fully understand the logistics of his own downfall. He would never know that his convenience, using his work iPad to log into his girlfriend's iCloud, was the exact detail that allowed his wife to discover the affair, leading directly to the confrontation that killed the woman he had carelessly used. He would never understand that the $400 the Filipina in Manila earned monthly was the real measure of her desperate need, the vulnerability he had exploited, and the tragedy that resulted.